extremely uncommon.
Hi guys, this is part 2
The son of a famous and
of
successful
cleaning
man
the mess
who
up.
manages to surpass the father.
So a
in
teenager
glory
already
and power.
does, so she can go ahead and put her clothes
The
on.
reason this type is uncommon is simple.
Let's get my
The
clothes
father
on
most
for
often
today.
manages to
I
amass
want
his
to wear the
fortune,
hat.
his kingdom, because he begins with little or nothing. A desperate urge impels him to succeed. He has nothing to lose by cunning and impetuousness, and has no famous father of his own to compete against.
I just put my hat right
This kind of
here.
man has reason to believe in himself, to believe that his way of doing things is the best.
And yes, I stole
Because
Bobby
after
that
all, it worked for
phone
him.
because I have an iPhone.
When a man like
phone,
this
so I
has a
can give it
son,
back to her.
he becomes domineering and oppressive,
Mom.
imposing his lessons on the son, who is starting off life in circumstances
That was
totally
cute.
different from those in which the father himself began.
I have a
Instead of allowing the son to go in a new direction, the father will try to put him in his own shoes, perhaps secretly wishing the boy will fail, as Philip half wanted to see Alexander thrown from Bucephalus.
They cleaned up.
Fathers envy their sons' youth and vigor, after all, and their desire is to control and dominate. The sons of such men tend to become cowed and cautious, terrified of losing what their fathers
First, I'm
have
gonna
gained.
start by making my bed.
The son will never step out of his father's shadow unless he adopts the
That's
ruthless
it.
strategy of Alexander. Disparage the
Okay,
past.
this up.
Create your own kingdom.
I'm like, I need a
Put the
shell.
father in the shadows
A
instead of
shell,
letting him
a
do
shell.
the same to you.
Yeah, I can.
If you cannot materially start from ground zero, it would be foolish to renounce an inheritance. You can at least begin from ground zero psychologically, by throwing off the weight of the past and charting a new direction. Alexander instinctively recognized that privileges of birth are impediments to power. Be merciless with the past, then. Not only with your father and his father, but with your own earlier achievements. Only the weak rest on their laurels and dote on past triumphs. In the game of power, there is never time to rest.
But I put it on this side.
Keys to power.
In
In many ancient kingdoms, for example Bengal and Sumatra, after the king had ruled for several years, his subjects would execute him. This was done partly as a ritual of renewal, but also to prevent him from growing too powerful. But the king would generally try to establish a permanent order at the expense of other families and of his own sons. Instead of protecting the tribe and leading it in times of war, he would attempt to dominate it. And so he would be beaten to death or executed in an elaborate ritual. Now that he was no longer around for his honors to go to his head, he could be worshipped as a god. Meanwhile, the field had been cleared for a new and youthful order to establish itself. The ambivalent, hostile attitude towards the king or father figure also finds expression in legends of heroes who didn't know their father. Moses, the archetypal man of power, was found abandoned among the bulrushes and never knew his parents.
Now,
Without a father to compete with him or limit him, he could attain the heights of power.
yeah, this.
Hercules had no earthly father. He was the son of the god Zeus. Later in his life, Alexander the Great spread the story that the god Jupiter Ammon had sired him, not Philip of Macedon. Legends and rituals like these
Put your
eliminate the
head
human
up,
father,
Bobby.
because he
Happy
symbolizes the
love.
destructive power of the past. The past prevents the young hero from creating his own world.
Put your
He
head
must do
up,
as his father
Bobby.
did,
Why is it
even
night?
after his father is
No,
dead or
it's
powerless.
Sorry,
The
guys,
hero must
that
bow and
Sorry,
scrape
guys,
before his
that
predecessor
tonight I did
and
not
yield
need
to
do
tradition and precedent.
it.
What had success in the past must be carried over to the present, even though circumstances have greatly changed. The past also weighs the hero down with an inheritance that he is terrified of losing, making him timid and cautious. Power depends on the ability to fill a void, to occupy a field that has been cleared of the dead weight of the past. Only after the father figure has been properly done away with will you have the necessary space to create and establish a new order. There are several strategies you can adopt to accomplish this.
Okay.
Variations on the execution of the king that disguise the violence of the impulse by channeling it in socially acceptable forms. Perhaps the simplest way to escape the shadow of the past is simply to belittle it, playing on the timeless antagonism between the generations,
Okay.
stirring up the young against the old. For this, you need a convenient older figure to pillory. Mao Zedong, confronting a culture that fiercely resisted change, played on the suppressed resentment against the overbearing presence of the venerable Confucius in Chinese culture.
They had this.
John F. Kennedy knew the dangers of getting lost in the past. He radically distinguished his presidency from that of his predecessor, Dwight D. Eisenhower, and also from the preceding decade, the 1950s, which Eisenhower personified. Kennedy, for instance, would not play the dull and fatherly game of golf, a symbol of retirement and privilege, and Eisenhower's passion. Instead, he played football on the White House lawn. In every aspect, his administration represented vigor and youth, as opposed to the stodgy Eisenhower. Kennedy had discovered an old truth. The young are easily set against the old, since they yearn to make their own place in the world and resent the shadow of their fathers. The distance you establish from your predecessor often demands some symbolism, a way of advertising itself publicly. Louis XIV, for example, created such symbolism when he rejected the traditional palace of the French kings and built his own palace of Versailles. King Philip II of Spain did the same when he created his center of power, the palace of El Escorial, in what was then the middle of nowhere. But Louis carried the game further. He would not be a king like his father or earlier ancestors. He would not wear a crown or carry a scepter or sit on a throne. He would establish a new kind of imposing authority. Symbols and rituals of its own. Louis made his ancestors' rituals into laughable relics of the past. Follow his example. Don't be seen as following your predecessor's path. If you do, you will never surpass him. You must physically demonstrate your difference by establishing a style and symbolism that sets you apart. The Roman Emperor Augustus, successor to Julius Caesar, understood this thoroughly. Caesar had been a great general, a theatrical figure whose spectacles kept the Romans entertained, an international emissary. Seduced by the charms of Cleopatra, a larger-than-life figure. So Augustus, despite his own theatrical tendencies, competed with Caesar not by trying to outdo him, but by differentiating himself from him. He based his power on a return to Roman simplicity, an austerity of both style and substance. Against the memory of Caesar's sweeping presence, Augustus posed a quiet and manly dignity. The problem with the overbearing predecessor is that he fills the vistas before you with symbols of the past. You have no room to create your own name. To deal with the situation, you need to hunt out the vacuums, those areas in culture that have been left. You can become the first and principal figure to shine. When Pericles of Athens was about to launch a career as a statesman, he looked for the one thing that was missing in Athenian politics. Most of the great politicians of his time had allied themselves with the aristocracy. Indeed, Pericles himself had aristocratic tendencies. Yet he decided to throw in his hat with the city's democratic elements. The choice had nothing to do with his personal beliefs, but it launched him on a brilliant career. Out of necessity, he became a man of the people. Instead of competing in an arena filled with great leaders, both past and present, he would make a name for himself where no shadows could obscure his presence. When the painter Diego de Velázquez began his career, he knew he couldn't compete in refinement and technique with the great Renaissance painters who had come before him. Style that by the standards of the time seemed coarse and rough, in a way that had never been seen before. And in this style, he excelled. There were members of the Spanish court who wanted to demonstrate. The newness of Velázquez's style thrilled them. Most people are afraid to break so boldly with tradition, but they seek the old forms and reinvigorate the culture. This is why there is so much power to be gained from entering vacuums and voids.
middle.
There is a kind of stubborn stupidity that recurs throughout history, and is a strong impediment to power. The superstitious belief that if the person before you succeeded by doing A, B, and C, you can recreate their success by doing the same thing. This cookie-cutter approach will seduce the uncreative, for it is easy and appeals to their timidity and their laziness. But circumstances never repeat themselves exactly.
Yeah.
When General Douglas MacArthur assumed command of American forces in the Philippines during World War II, an assistant handed him a book containing the various precedents established by the commanders before him, the methods that had been successful for them. MacArthur asked the assistant how many copies there were of this book. 6, the assistant answered. Well, the general replied, you get all those 6 copies together and burn them. Every one of them. I'll not be bound by precedents.
I'll just wait for you.
Anytime a problem comes up, I'll make the decision at once, immediately. Adopt this ruthless strategy toward the past. Burn all the books and train yourself.
Yes, Mom. We only got like a little bit of light.
As they happen. You may believe that you have separated yourself from the predecessor or father figure, but as you grow older, you must be eternally vigilant lest you become the father you had rebelled against.
Okay.
As a young man, Mao Zedong disliked his father, and in the own identity and a new set of values. But as he aged, his father's ways crept back in. Mao's father over intellect. Mao had scoffed at this as a young man, but as he grew older, he unconsciously returned to his father's views and echoed such outdated ideas, forcing a whole generation of Chinese intellectuals into manual labor. A nightmarish mistake that cost his regime dearly.
I'm so sleepy.
Remember, you are your own father.
Okay.
Do not let yourself spend years creating yourself only to let your guard down and allow the ghost of the past, father, habit, history, to sneak back in. Finally, as noted in the story of Louis XV, plenitude and prosperity tend to make us lazy and inactive. When our power is secure, we have no need to act. This is a serious danger, especially for those who achieve success and power at an early age. The playwright Tennessee Williams, for instance, found himself skyrocketed from obscurity to fame by the success of The Glass Menagerie. The sort of life which I had had previous to this popular success, he later wrote, was one that required endurance, a life of clawing and scratching. But it was a good life, because it was the sort of life for which the human organism is created. I was not aware of how much vital energy had gone into the struggle until the struggle was removed. This was security at last. I sat down and looked about me, and was suddenly very depressed. Williams had a nervous breakdown, which may in fact have been necessary for him. Pushed to the psychological edge, he could start writing with the old vitality again, and he produced A Streetcar Named Desire.
Oh wait, what do you mean?
Fyodor Dostoevsky, similarly, whenever he wrote a successful novel, would feel that the financial security he had gained made the act of creation unnecessary.
Wait,
he would take his entire savings to the casino and would not leave until he had gambled away his... Once reduced to poverty, he could write again. It's not necessary to go to such extremes, but you must be prepared to return to square one psychologically, rather than growing fat and lazy with prosperity.
It's okay, baby.
Pablo Picasso could deal with success, but only by constantly changing the style of his paintings, often breaking
Okay, you sit down right here. Does she sit down? Oh, yep, she sit down. Okay, I'll be right back.
with what had made him successful before. How often our early triumphs turn us into a kind of caricature of ourselves. Powerful people recognize these traps. Like Alexander the Great, they struggle constantly to recreate themselves. The father must not be allowed to return. He must be slain at every step of the way. Reversal.
Use the second left lane to turn left on the ramp. Then use the right lane to take the I-675 south ramp.
The shadow of a great predecessor.
Use the right lane to take the I-675 south ramp.
I guess let's go there.
If it is chosen,
3/4 of a mile.
tactic that can be discarded once it has brought you power.
Okay, now we just need to wait.
Napoleon III used the name and legend of his illustrious granduncle Napoleon Bonaparte to help him become first president and then emperor of France. Once on the throne, however, he didn't stay tied to the past. He quickly showed how different his reign would be, and was careful to keep the public from
In half a mile, merge on the I-675 south.
Slow down.
that Bonaparte had attained.
Let's play a game.
The past often has elements
what
worth
should I make for
appropriating,
Memphis today?
qualities that it would be foolish to reject out of a need to distinguish herself.
I think I
Even
can
Alexander the
Memphis
Great
today.
recognized and was influenced by his father's skill in organizing an army. Making a display of doing things differently from your predecessor can make you seem childish and in fact out of control.
This is real. I might open the
75 south,
fridge.
9 miles.
Wait, what do you wait? Make some milk up here.
Logic of their own.
Bippity, boopity,
Joseph II, son of the Austrian Empress Maria Theresa, made a show of doing the exact opposite of his mother, dressing like an ordinary citizen, staying in inns instead of palaces, appearing as the people's emperor. Maria Theresa, on the other hand, had been regal and aristocratic. The problem was that she had also been beloved, an empress who ruled wisely after years of learning the hard way. If you have the kind of intelligence and instinct that will point you in the right direction, playing the rebel will not be dangerous. But if you're mediocre, as Joseph II was in comparison to his mother, you are better off learning from your predecessor's knowledge and experience, which are based on something real.
iPads on for.
Finally, it is often wise to keep an eye on the young, your future rivals in power. Just as you try to rid yourself of your father, they will soon play the same trick on you, denigrating everything you have accomplished. Just as you rise by rebelling against the past, keep an eye on those rising from below, and never give them the chance to do the same to you. The great Baroque artist and architect Pietro Bernini was a master at sniffing out younger potential rivals and keeping them in his shadow. One day, a young stonemason named Francesco Borromini showed Bernini his architectural sketches. Recognizing his talent immediately, Bernini instantly hired Borromini as his assistant,
Yeah, I'll just pretend.
which delighted the young man, but was actually only a tactic to keep him close at hand, so that he could play psychological games on him and create in him a kind of inferiority complex.
And this is Dragon.
And indeed, despite Borromini's brilliance, Bernini has the greater fame. His strategy with Borromini he made a lifelong practice. Fearing that the great sculptor Alessandro Algardi, for example, would eclipse him in fame, he arranged it so that Algardi could only find work as his assistant. And any assistant who rebelled against Bernini and tried to strike out on his own would find his career ruined.
Wait, do you understand? Can I get this? Yes, right.
Here are some further reflections on this law.
The phone down.
From A Pocket Mirror for Heroes by Balthazar Gracian.
Okay, the phone needs to be
The excellence of being first.
You cannot see that.
Many would have shone like the very phoenix in their occupations if others had not preceded them. Being first is a great advantage.
I'll tell you what.
With eminence,
sandwich,
twice as good.
For some reason.
Deal the first hand and you will win the upper ground. Those who go first win fame by right of birth, and those who follow are like second sons, contenting themselves with meager portions.
Okay, wait, let me get a coffee ready.
Solomon opted wisely for pacifism, yielding warlike things to his
Actually,
father.
I want cocoa.
By changing course, he found it easier to become a hero.
Look at that.
And our great Philip II governed the entire world from the throne of his prudence, astonishing the ages. If his unconquered father was a model of energy, Philip was a paradigm of prudence.
Here you go.
This sort of novelty has helped the well-advised win a place in the role of the great. Without leaving their own art, the ingenious leave the common
Now we
path
can
and
all
take,
eat.
even in professions gray with age, new steps toward eminence. Horace yielded epic poetry to Virgil, and marshaled the lyric to Horace.
Ooh, that'll show you.
Terence opted for comedy, Perseus for satire,
Nice.
each hoping to be the first in his genre. Bold fancy never succumbed
Yeah,
to facile imitation.
Super good.
From Plutarch's Life of Pericles. As a young man, Pericles was inclined to shrink from facing the people, One reason for this was that he was considered to bear a distinct resemblance to the tyrant Pisistratus.
I'll just go with.
And when men who were well on in years remarked on the charm of Pericles' voice
But that
and the
was
smoothness and fluency of his speech, they were astonished at the resemblance between the two. The fact that he was rich and that he came of a distinguished family and possessed exceedingly powerful friends made the fear of ostracism very real to him. And at the beginning of his career, he took no part in politics, but devoted himself to soldiering, in which he showed great daring and enterprise. However, the time came when Aristides was dead, Themistocles in exile, and Cimon frequently absent on distant campaigns. Then, at last, Pericles decided to attach himself to the People's Party and to take up the cause of the poor and the many, instead of that of the rich and the few. In spite of the fact that this was quite contrary to his own temperament, which was thoroughly aristocratic. He was afraid, apparently, of being suspected of aiming at a dictatorship.
Wait, I need the baby.
So that when he saw that Simon's sympathies were strongly with the nobles, and that Cimon was the idol of the aristocratic party, Pericles began to ingratiate himself with the people, partly for self-preservation, and partly by way of securing power against his rival. He now entered upon a new mode of life. Never to be seen walking in any street except the one which led to the marketplace and the council chamber.
What you call it?
From The Lives of the Artists by Giorgio Vasari. The Life of Pietro Perugino, painter. How beneficial poverty may sometimes be to those with talent, and how it may serve as a powerful goad to make them perfect or excellent in whatever occupation they might choose, can be seen very clearly in the actions of Pietro Perugino.
Oh wait, let me put the baby
Wishing by
down.
means of his ability to attain some respectable
So before
rank,
we go to
after
school,
leaving disastrous
everybody
calamities
needs to take a
behind
little
in
nap, or we
Perugia
can just,
and
or
coming
y'all
to
can just
Florence,
chill.
he remained
But the
there many
baby's gonna
months in
take a nap.
poverty, sleeping in a chest, since he had no other bed. He turned night and day, and with the greatest zeal continually applied himself to the study of his
I'll
profession.
just fit a feet though.
After painting had become second nature to him, Pietro's only pleasure was always to be working in his craft, and constantly to be painting. And because he always had the dread of poverty before his eyes, he did things to make money which he probably would not have bothered to do had he not been forced to support.
It's a good for my spot.
Perhaps wealth would have closed to
Can I
him
take
and
a
his
shower
talent
anyway?
the path to excellence, just as poverty had opened it up to him. But need spurred him on, since he desired to rise from such a miserable and lowly
Wash my
position.
body.
If not perhaps
Wash
the
this
summit and supreme
or-
height of excellence, then at least to a point where he could have enough to live on.
Or
For this
wash
reason, he
my
took no
neck.
notice of cold, hunger, discomfort, inconvenience,
feet.
toil,
Wait,
or
wash my-
shame. If he could only live one day in ease and repose.
okay, now just
And he would always
wash
say,
it.
and as if it were a proverb,
Right there.
that after bad weather, good weather must
I
follow.
need this right
And that
here.
during the good weather, houses must be built for shelter in times of need. From Ernest Jones, The Problem of Paul
Wash
Morphy.
right here.
The slightest acquaintance with chess
Okay,
shows
let's
one
try
that
off.
it is a play substitute for the art of war.
And then put on my
And indeed,
clothes.
it has been a favorite recreation for some of the greatest military leaders, from William the Conqueror to Napoleon.
Why do you use the bathroom?
In the contest between the opposing armies, the same principles of both strategy and tactics are displayed as in actual war. The same foresight and powers of calculation are necessary. The same capacity for divining the plans of the opponent. And the rigor with which decisions are followed by their consequences is, if anything,
We
even
might
more
go to the
ruthless.
pool tomorrow.
More than that, it is
Yeah,
plain that the
but-
unconscious motive actuating the players is not the mere love of pugnacity characteristic of all competitive games, but the grimmer one of father murder.
It is really
It
time
is
for
true
them
that
to
the
go-
original goal of capturing the
it's time
king
for them to
has
go
been
to
given
sleep,
up.
So yeah.
But from the point of view of motive,
gonna take
there
them to
is,
sleep.
except in respect of crudity, not
Why
appreciable
else-
change in the
okay,
present
I'll
goal
just go to the other.
of sterilizing him in immobility. Checkmate means literally, the king is dead. Our knowledge of the unconscious motivation of chess playing tells us that what it represented could only have been the wish to overcome the father in an acceptable way. It is no doubt significant that 19th century chess champion Paul Morphy's soaring odyssey into the higher realms of chess began just a year after the unexpectedly sudden death of his father, which had been a great shock to him. And we may surmise that his brilliant effort of sublimation was, like Shakespeare's Hamlet and Freud's The Interpretation of Dreams, a reaction to this critical event. Something should now be said about the reception Morpheus' successes met with, for they were of such a kind as to raise the question whether his subsequent collapse may not have been influenced through his perhaps belonging to the type that Freud has described under the name of Die am Erfolgelscheitern, those wrecked by success. Couched in more psychological language, was Morphe affrighted at his own presumptuousness when the light of publicity was thrown on his great success? Freud has pointed out that the people who break under the strain of too great success do so because they can endure it only in imagination, not in reality. To castrate the father in a dream is a very different matter from doing it in reality. The real situation provokes the unconscious guilt at its full force, and the penalty may be mental collapse.
Okay, let me just get my plushies first. And then put this on.
The 42nd law.
Go to sleep.
Strike the shepherd and the sheep will scatter.
Get my plushies.
Judgment. Trouble can often be traced to a single strong individual. The stirrer, the arrogant underling, the poisoner of goodwill.
Okay,
If you allow such people room to operate, others will succumb to their influence. Do not wait for the troubles they cause to multiply. Do not try to negotiate with them. They are irredeemable. Neutralize their influence by isolating or banishing them. Strike at the source of the trouble, and the sheep will scatter. Observance of the law, number 1. Near the end of the 6th century BC, the city-state of Athens overthrew the series of petty tyrants who had dominated its politics for decades. It established instead a democracy that was to last over a century, a democracy that became the source of its power and its proudest achievement. But as the democracy evolved, so did a problem the Athenians had never faced. How to deal with those who did not concern themselves with the cohesion of a small city surrounded by enemies, who did not work for its greater glory, but thought of only themselves and their own ambitions and petty intrigues. The Athenians understood that these people, if left alone, would sow dissension, divide the city into factions.
I'm just gonna put that right here. Okay, let's go back upstairs, and I have to go to sleep.
Okay, baby. Shoes off my seat.
Okay. Okay, let's go upstairs.
Come on, Sharon, let's go.
Okay, let's go to sleep.